Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White. This mandate, which had been delivered with great majesty, was obeyed without the slightest demur, and Charlotte made the best of her way off with the packages, while Noah held the door open and watched her out. "She's kept tolerably well under, ain't she?" he asked as he resumed his seat, in the tone of a keeper who had tamed some wild animal. "Quite perfect," rejoined Fagin, clapping him on the shoulder. "You're a genius, my dear." "Why, I suppose if I wasn't I shouldn't be here," replied Noah. "But I say, she'll be back if you lose time." "Now, what do you think?" said Fagin. "If you was like my friend, could you do better than join him?" "Is he in a good way of business?" "That's where it is," responded Noah, winking one of his little eyes. "The top of the tree employs a power of hands, has the very best society in the profession." "Regular town maters?" asked Mr. Claypool. "Not a countryman among 'em, and I don't think he'd take you, even on my recommendation, if you didn't run rather short of assistance just now," replied Fagin. "Should I have to hand over?" said Noah, slapping his breeches pocket. "It couldn't possibly be done without," replied Fagin in a most decided manner. "£20, though, it's a lot of money." "Not when it's a note you can't get rid of," retorted Fagin. "Number and date taken, I suppose. Payment stopped at the bank. It's not worth much to him. It'll have to go abroad, and he couldn't sell it for a great deal in the market." "When could I see him?" asked Noah doubtfully. "Tomorrow morning." "Where?" "Here." Said Noah. "What's the wages?" "Live, like a gentleman. Board and lodging, pipes and spirits free. Half of all you earn and half of all the young woman earns," replied Mr. Fagin. Whether Noah Claypool, whose rapacity was none of the least comprehensive, would have acceded even to these glowing terms, he had been a perfectly free agent, is very doubtful, but as he recollected that, in the event of his refusal, it was in the power of his new acquaintance to give him up to justice immediately, and more unlikely things had come to pass, he gradually relented, and said he thought that it would suit him. "But you see," observed Noah, "as she will be able to do a good deal, I should like to take something very light." "A little fancy work?" suggested Fagin. Something of that sort," replied Noah. "What do you think would suit me now?" "Something not too trying for the strength, and not very dangerous, you know. That's the sort of thing." "I heard you talk of something in the spyway upon the others, my dear," said Fagin. "My friend wants somebody who would do that well, very much." "Why, I did mention that, and I shouldn't mind turning my hand to it sometimes," rejoined Mr. Claypool slowly. "But it wouldn't pay by itself, you know." "That's true," observed the Jew, ruminating or pretending to ruminate. "No, it might not." "What do you think, then?" asked Noah, anxiously regarding him. "Something in the sneaking way, where it was pretty sure work and not much more risk than being at home?" "What do you think of the old ladies?" asked Fagin. "There's a good deal of money made in snatching their bags and parcels and running round the corner." "Don't they holler out a good deal and scratch sometimes?" asked Noah, shaking his head. "I don't think that would answer my purpose. Ain't there any other line open?" "Stop," said Fagin, laying his hand on Noah's knee. "The kinchin lay." "The kinchins, my dear," said Fagin, "is the young children that's sent on errands by their mothers, with sixpences and shillings, and the lay is just to take their money away. They've always got it ready in their hands, then knock 'em into the kennel and walk off very slow, as if there were nothing else the matter but a child fallen down and hurt itself. Ha ha ha! Ah ha ha!" roared Mr. Claypool, kicking up his legs in an ecstasy. "Lord, that's the very thing." "To be sure it is," replied Fagin, "and you can have a few good beats chalked out in Camden Town, and Battle Bridge and neighborhoods like that, where they're always going errands, and you can upset as many kinchins as you want any hour in the day. Ha ha ha!" With this, Fagin poked Mr. Claypole in the side, and they joined in a burst of laughter both long and loud. Well, that's all right, said Noah, when he had recovered himself, and Charlotte had returned. What time tomorrow shall we say? Will 10 do? Asked Fagin, adding, as Mr. Claypole nodded assent, What name shall I tell my good friend? Mr. Bolter, replied Noah, who had prepared himself for such emergency. Mr. Morris Bolter. This is Mrs. Bolter. Mrs. Bolter's humble servant, said Fagin, bowing with grotesque politeness. I hope I shall know her better very shortly. Do you hear the gentleman, Charlotte? Thundered Mr. Claypole. Yes, Noah, dear, replied Mrs. Bolter, extending her hand. She calls me Noah, as a sort of fond way of talking, said Mrs. Bolter, late Claypole, turning to Fagin. You understand? Oh, yes, I understand perfectly, replied Fagin, telling the truth for once. Good night, good night. With many adieus and good wishes, Mr. Fagin went his way. Noah Claypole, bespeaking his good lady's attention, proceeded to enlighten her relative to the arrangement he had made, with all the haughtiness and air of superiority, becoming not only a member of the sterner sex, but a gentleman who appreciated the dignity of his special appointment on the Kinchin Lay, in London and its vicinity. Chapter 43, wherein is shown how the artful dodger got into trouble. And so it was you that was your own friend, was it? Asked Mr. Claypole, otherwise Bolter, when, by virtue of the compact entered into between them, he had removed next day to Fagin's house. Cod, I thought as much last night. Every man's his own friend, my dear, replied Fagin, with his most insinuating grin. He hasn't as good a one as himself anyway. Except sometimes, replied Morris Bolter, assuming the air of a man of the world. Some people are nobody's enemies but their own, you know. Don't believe that, said Fagin. When a man's own enemy, it's only because he's too much his own friend, not because he's careful for everybody, but himself. Pooh, pooh. There ain't such a thing in nature. There ought not to be, if there is, replied Mr. Bolter. That stands to reason. Some conjurers say that number 3 is the magic number, and some say number 7. It's neither, my friend, neither. It's number 1. Ha ha ha! Cried Mr. Bolter. Number 1 forever. In a little community like ours, my dear, said Fagin, who felt it necessary to qualify this position, we have a general number 1, without considering me too as the same, and all the other young people. Oh, the devil! Exclaimed Mr. Bolter. You see, pursued Fagin, affecting to disregard this interruption, we are so mixed up together and identified in our interest that it must be so. For instance, it's your object to take care of number 1, meaning yourself. Certainly, replied Mr. Bolter. You're about right there. Well, you can't take care of yourself, number 1, without taking care of me, number 1. Number 2, you mean, said Mr. Bolter, who was largely endowed with the quality of selfishness. No, I don't, retorted Fagin. I'm of the same importance to you as you are to yourself. I say, interrupted Mr. Bolter, you're a very nice man, and I'm very fond of you, but we ain't quite so thick together as all that comes to. Only think, said Fagin, shrugging his shoulders and stretching out his hands. Only consider. You've done what's a very pretty thing, and what I love you for doing, and what at the same time would put that cravat round your throat that's so very easily tied and so very difficult to unloose in plain English, the halter. Mr. Bolter put his hand to his neckerchief, as if he felt it inconveniently tight, and murmured an assent, qualified in tone but not in substance. The gallows, continued Fagin, the gallows, my dear, is an ugly finger post, which points out a very short and sharp turning that has stopped many a bold fellow's career on the broad highway. To keep in the easy road, and keep it at a distance, is object number 1 with you. Of course it is, replied Mr. Bolter. What do you talk about such things for? And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.